Welcome to the Jubilee Road podcast with authors and bloggers Jami Amerine of Sacred Ground, Sticky Floors, and Rebecca Huff of That Organic Mom. Each week you'll be inspired and encouraged by real talk, real issues, and the grace journey in real life. Grab a cup of coffee or sit as comfortably as you can in the carpool line and listen in for delightful conversation that'll make you think, sort through hopes and hurts, and most importantly, realize you're not alone on this wild, wild ride. Buckle up. Here are Jami and Rebecca.
This is Rebecca Huff with the Jubilee Road podcast, and today, for our second time, we're going to be interviewing Dr. Janetta Jamerson. And I was supposed to edit a little something out the last time we had an interview, and I didn't get to. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. J?
Yes, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I've been practicing for over a decade. And last time I said that I graduated in 2009, but the truth is I graduated in 2006. So I've been at it a little bit longer than I was willing to admit last time.
It's like when you have kids and you can't remember which one's name and what year they're born in.
Or when I think I'm still 30 instead of 40.
Yeah, that's wishful thinking on my part. We have a women's support group on Facebook, Hopelively for Women, and I asked the ladies if they had more questions for you, and of course they always come up with plenty. So we're here for another interview. So do you want to just dive right in?
Let's dive in.
Okay. One of the first things, we had just recorded a whole entire series, and this is going to come out before that series because season 4 is going to be on marriage.
Okay.
But actually, I think it maybe was the last episode of the previous season was on self-doubt and comparison.
Okay.
And you won't know what we talked about on there, but I was wondering if you might have anything to add about like people who experience self-doubt and comparison, which I think that's a lot of us.
I'd say that's all of us.
Okay.
All of us are tempted to do that. We're always tempted to measure ourselves somehow. We come into the world knowing that we need to win someone's approval to meet our needs. If we don't meet mom's approval, we don't eat and we don't have shelter. So it's
Not
just
good.
kind of natural that we would recognize that we really need to like connect to and impress the people around us. And then we turn that inward and make decisions about who we are based on what we're seeing in the environment. And that is where things get a little bit tricky. So I did have a story from my own life about comparison and evaluation of myself based on other people. So in the space that we're in right now, when I first came to this office, I heard all about the woman who occupied the office before me. Now she is a psychiatrist, and
Sorry, please continue.
Okay. She's a medical doctor, and in the field of healthcare, the medical doctors are definitely the highest on the hierarchy of healthcare providers. And she also happens to be a mental health care provider, so she's directly ahead of me as far as the hierarchy of success and impressiveness in the field. And so I learned that she was also someone who was in my bar class after some just mingling and getting to know each other, and I realized that she is the one who everyone spoke about when I got here. And of course, I've been very impressed with her.
You went to this bar class, but you didn't know that she was in it?
I didn't know.
And you found out later that she was...
that she's
wow,
the one that's been taking
small
bar
world.
classes with me. So we do talk and consult every now and again in those early morning hours. And she is, again, the medical doctor in the same field and just super kind person. That's one of the things that everybody here said about her. She was just really, really kind and wonderful, and that's a huge value of mine. So she's hitting all the marks and all the values that I have. And she's beautiful, and she's also a woman of color. I mean, just so many things that make it easy for me to compare myself to her. She even practiced in my exact office. And in the parking lot, I noticed that she has the Infinity version of my Nissan.
Oh, boy.
Way too easy.
Piling it on.
Way too easy to compare myself and decide that I'm less than. And then one day, she came up to me before bar class got started and said that she was struggling because she was about to go to her college reunion. Now, she went to Ivy League school, and I'm completely 100% state school educated. So that's already impressive. And so here she is at an Ivy League college, and she's concerned that she's going to go back and not be impressive enough. She told me about one woman who had written a book even. She was like, well, I haven't written a book. And I'm thinking, well, you're the medical doctor and everyone loves you. You're so great. And she thought that she wasn't good enough to go back to her college reunion as is. as impressive as I think she is. So we talked about it, and a technique that I provided for her was to outline what her values are and what characteristics are important for her in a successful person, and then check herself on those. So basically create your own measuring stick and then measure yourself against that. And most of us are hitting the marks on the things that we value. And she came back and said, that was really helpful.
Wow.
I don't want to write a book, so why would I be great at writing books? I thought, that's brilliant. And so the things that she really valued about herself, she was doing really well. And so that gave her some confidence to go back to her Ivy League school and mingle with the rest of the impressive people.
What a great story.
Isn't that great? I just thought it was way too funny. When you asked about comparison, that was the first thing I thought of.
Wow. So whenever she went back and did that, she basically saw that by her own account, she was doing all the things that were important to her. Yeah. And what she had been doing previously was comparing herself to
people who had different measuring sticks.
Right.
It didn't make sense for her.
Why does that happen to us? Where does that come from?
Our need to just see where we are in the world and measure our sense of success. And we live in a world that's very focused on success.
We're just born wanting to know where we stand, basically.
Yeah. Honestly, it goes back to needing resources. And again, if you impress your mother enough, she meets your needs. And so we just learn to do that. If you impress your teacher, you get the grade, you get the opportunity. So there's reason that we believe that. But when it comes to evaluating our own self-worth, those things really need to be immune to what the rest of the world expects from us.
Well, how did that make...
think the rest of the world expects from us.
Right. Yes. Because we don't really know.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. So how did that make you feel about comparing yourself to her?
Oh, glad you brought that back around. Honestly, I do what I want to do. I think I maximize my gifts, and I really am in this space where I'm using my passions. And I'm pursuing my passions, and talking to you and doing this is another something that I'm excited about. So when measured against my own stick of my values, I'm doing pretty good. And that doesn't mean I don't have room to grow, but I'm confident in my ability to grow in those areas.
That's really neat. And obviously there's something to be said about bar class and psychologists. So... Obviously, doctors know something about bar class.
That's right. There's several impressive women, but when you're at the 5 a.m., 6 a.m. class, there's, of course, physicians and nurses and attorneys.
Got to fit it in somewhere.
That's right.
Okay. Well, that was really helpful, and I think I'm going to go home and do that exercise myself. Yeah. That's really good. Okay, this is a question that comes from our group.
Okay.
This was asked by Sherry, and she wants to know, how can I stop using food as a crutch when I have a problem? I either eat things that are bad for me or too much of whatever I'm eating.
Okay. First, I want to address her language.
Okay.
Yeah. The use of the word crutch is negative. I eat things that are bad for me is negative. So she's basically already putting herself down for her coping skills. And she peeled back the layers and said, I'm just trying to cope. Well, that's her and everybody else in the world, including myself. We are trying to cope. We have stressors that are beyond our control that we need to cope with. We have things that are on our hearts that are unsatisfied, and we need to cope with that deficit. So that's not inherently negative. That's just kind of a fact of life, an objective fact of life. So if she could use her language and say, this is a coping skill that I use that I'm not pleased with, I would like a different coping skill. Oh. Then we can talk about how to explore coping skills that don't lead to her feeling shame or feeling bad about herself, or that are in line with her value system.
That's true.
So if the choice of food doesn't feel good because it doesn't line up with her values for her life or other goals she has for her life, like we talked about last time, I want to be healthy, but also want to eat Chick-fil-A, how to balance that. So she might just want to choose something other than food to cope, but recognizing there's no shame in needing to cope. Right. And then you have the freedom to choose a coping skill that fits. And it may look different for different stressors, or it may look different for different aspects of your life or in different situations, but it definitely gives you the opportunity to see it for what it is and choose something that satisfies. So that's not probably the answer that she was looking for, but needs to peel back the layers a little bit more to determine what it is that she's coping with, and then come up with appropriate coping skills that actually address that concern. Right.
I like that, that it is a coping skill as opposed to a crutch. I like the way you changed the perspective there on that. I use coping skills like avoiding
Yeah.
the thing or whatever. I always wanted to be the person who used working out as a coping. If I used working out as a coping skill, I would be as fit as you are.
Well, maybe you will.
Right. So how can we change our coping skill then? If say our coping skill is to eat or to just binge watch 47 episodes of something on Netflix,
Right.
how can we go about changing our coping skill to something else?
Okay, well, again, first identify what it is that's missing, what it is that you need, because the coping skill will address that issue versus I'm anxious because I'm not meeting a need, let me cope with this anxiety. So peel it back beyond that and find out what is it that I'm anxious about, and then find something that makes sense for that. So exercise makes sense generally all the time. But again, it's not always the most appropriate skill. Maybe I need to go talk to someone about a relational concern. Exercise isn't going to fix that.
Right.
Exercise may help me clear my head so that I can come up with the right language to approach that person. But I can exercise all I want to, and I'm still going to be probably displeased or dissatisfied about that relational situation going on in my life. So give yourself the opportunity to explore again, rather than judging the fact that something feels bad and then eating or grabbing whatever's close or accessible. I have people that come in with alcohol problems, and although I don't treat substance abuse, that's something that they find that they use for coping. Just as an aside, I always say alcohol for celebration, not for coping. So pick your C, celebration, not coping.
Right.
And they feel a lot of shame about that. And then I remind them that, well, actually, it's a pretty smart choice. It's just not a healthy one, because alcohol is accessible. It's acceptable to drink amongst friends and socially, or to have a glass of wine at the end of the day by yourself to unwind. It's affordable. You know, you can go pick it up anywhere, and you can afford something. It may not be the best stuff, but you can afford something that's going to take the edge off. So it's actually an efficient choice. It's just not healthy over the long term, because the other effects on your body are going to put you in a place where you need something else to cope with.
True.
Yeah. So, again, not judging the coping skill, but recognize that it really isn't helping you to do what you want to do, and then choose coping skills that really have fewer consequences. And that's where, you know, like we keep bringing up exercise, there's few consequences to exercise if you choose something that's appropriate for your body. One of the reasons I do bar, I'm 40. You know, I'm not running like the college girls. You know, I'm not doing CrossFit, and there's this other things that my body is probably not going to tolerate as well. And that's okay to recognize what my limitations are.
And also, you love bar, right?
I do love bar. Yeah, it's something that's good for me. Yeah, pick something. That's a good point. Pick something that you like, something that you can sustain. We like Netflix.
Right. We like chocolate.
We like unhealthy food. Like,
Yeah.
that stuff is really, really good for us. But we also like spending time with friends and connecting with people. We also like, hopefully, taking walks, sitting in the sun, reading books. We also like a lot of those other things that don't have consequences for us in the long run.
Maybe make a list of other coping skills that you could use as a backup, just so that you wouldn't have that as the go-to.
That's right. And then you can choose. And sometimes you're going to choose the one. Sometimes you're going to choose the comfort food, the mac and cheese. But recognize that you do have the power to choose what those are. And a list is a great way to do that. That way, when you don't feel as capable of making a choice, you don't have to do the thinking. You don't have to come up with something. You can just refer to your journal with your list in it and see if you can try all these other things. Maybe make a deal with yourself. I will try 3 other things first. And if those don't do the trick, then I'm getting some fried chicken.
That sounds good. Yeah, because I'm all about lists about how to feel better and you know, things to do when I'm not having a wonderful day.
And then it's important not to judge what you've chosen. And recognize that choosing fried chicken today doesn't doom me for the rest of my life. Tomorrow, I may feel more equipped to pick a choice that sits better with me.
I love that. Okay, so make a list, and then whenever you need to cope, try 3 other things first. And then if that doesn't work, give yourself some grace and go eat your happy food. Okay. The next question is from Brenda, and she says, I am chronically ill, and I find I am happier alone the older I get, as it just drains me to be around others or create new relationships. Is this okay, or am I heading down a bad road?
Well, Brenda, I can't tell you what's okay for you, because you're the expert on you. That is what I always say. And so I would challenge yourself to think, are you wanting to isolate because it's easier, not necessarily more fulfilling? If it's more fulfilling, you know, some people are introverts. That's where That's where they get their energy, by being alone, exploring their creativity, and that's fine. There really is nothing wrong with that. But there is enough research to suggest that isolation isn't good for us. We even see that in addiction research. The rats who have relationships use less drugs. Or fewer drugs, I think is the grammatically correct way to say that. Hate it people say less something when it should be fewer. So fewer drugs the rats use. Mm-hmm. So it is important to be somewhat connected to some people, but you get to determine what that right level is for you. So I'm kind of answering the is it okay or not question in that total isolation is not healthy. We will not thrive in total isolation.
What if your only social interaction is online?
Oh, that's a good question.
And I'm not saying that she didn't say that on here.
No, she didn't.
I'm asking for a friend.
No. I do think that it's better than not having interaction at all. Mm-hmm. But we do have a need for touch, and to be around and absorb people with all of our senses.
Eye contact.
Yeah, and so not doing that really doesn't give us that fulfillment that we really need. I'd rather somebody have an online friend that was healthy, is the other thing, because there's too many unknowns with online friends of how healthy that it is. And again, if we only have one source, it's likely that there's some bias that's coming into our life that we can't detect. And so that's kind of risky. That could be pretty dangerous not to have multiple sources of interaction. And that doesn't mean you have to see 5 friends a week,
right?
But just have more than one outlet.
But bottom line is that only she can decide how much
that's correct.
Is good for her.
What her formula is.
Because she's the expert on herself, as we all are. Okay.
That's right.
I love that answer. Because really, that's true. Who knows us better than we do? Okay. Kim's question is, how about relationships with adult children? Ooh, I like this one. Mm-hmm. A bit of an issue for me right now. Also, how do we change society's views of mental health on a larger scale than what we had talked about before? I think we might have brought that up in our last episode that we interviewed with you. Okay. Is it okay? Yeah, that's pretty much.
Talk about those things. I'm not sure what she's asking about relationships with adult children.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a guess?
It's a bit of an issue for me right now, so I'm guessing. I would only have to guess, but I can apply my own adult children relationships. Sometimes there's a struggle there. Right. I don't know, maybe letting go or finding a balance of how much to be involved. I really don't know, because that's all she wrote. But
I can talk about common things that I see coming from the younger person launching into adulthood, as well as the parent who is working on letting go of their kids into adulthood. Now, we were in these roles for 2 decades with each other, where there's a bit of a hierarchy, and mom's in charge and has or dad, and then these are women that are writing in, or has the control or the power over the situation and the dynamic. And then we get to a point where the power dynamic has to shift, and it looks more like a peer relationship. And can you guess who's going to be more motivated to shift the dynamic? The kid. That's right. Because that gives the child the opportunity to develop more power and more confidence and a sense of self. And frankly, isn't that what we want for them? Mm-hmm. When we say that, it's like the professor that says, you're going to have to figure out what to let go of, but not in my class.
Right.
It's like, let go of something else. Time. Don't study for a different exam, but certainly do what you need. And our parents, as parents, we really struggle with that too. Assert yourself there in those spaces, but not at my kitchen table.
Makes me uncomfortable.
That's right. And we have to be willing to be uncomfortable to recognize that if things go the way we hope they will, our kids will be without us in the world, and we want them fully equipped to manage that. And that means that we're going to have to accept ways that they've grown and changed that are different from what we intended for them or hoped for them, or that allow us to maintain some power over them. So that's a common problem that I see, is that parents don't want to let go of their role.
Well, maybe she's talking about kids that don't want to move out.
Okay.
I don't know. I really don't know.
So, again, in that sense, it's a different challenge. Are we equipping them with what they need to exist in this world without us? And if we don't hold them responsible for being adults, then they're not going to be equipped. And that means if you're in your 20s and you're living at home, how are you contributing to the household? So nobody else gets a free ride, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I actually lived at home through college, And I can remember that my mom was fussing about how long my showers were. And I thought, again, I'm a good kid. I'm making great grades. I'm here with you. And it really was bothersome to her. I guess she felt disrespected in some ways, that I wasn't conserving the way that she raised me to conserve. But once I took over the water bill, that changed the dynamic a little bit. I took responsibility.
I love
for
that.
Yeah, it was great. And honestly, it was still the best deal in town. And I got to live in a home where someone maintained a nice home. I had my own room. I could eat if she prepared meals. And all I had to do was pay a water bill. Again, best deal in town. But it did teach me something about, well, when you're responsible for something, you look at it a little bit differently than when it's a free ride from somebody else.
Yes. Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. I did not know that you lived with your parents through college. And I think that is really good. And I love it because I talk to my friends who have older daughters about this particular subject all the time. And I don't know if it's, just specific with us or if this happens universally, but I feel like something happens to a young woman between the ages of maybe 17 and 23 that makes it very difficult for a mother and daughter to live together during that time. So something that happens when two adult women, a mother-daughter, is the experience that I've had, and several of my friends, we've talked about this, but so was that not an issue with you guys?
Oh, it was. It was the hardest
struggling
time.
to be...
But we were coming out of family trauma, which is one of the reasons why I decided to stay home. And I was going to college in my hometown. So we had a little bit of a specific dynamic. But yeah, we definitely went through the normal mother-daughter stuff and shifts. And when I ran off to graduate school, I did have to leave town. And that really was very healing for us to be more friends.
So the space and the distance allowed you guys to kind of shift your relationship.
It really was helpful.
I think that's how it was for us, too, with my older daughters when they moved out. The last few years they lived at home, it got a little rough around the edges. But then when they leave and they have a little space and they're in charge of wherever they live, kind of, and how things are done in their space, then, I don't know, they come back around. But
well, they gain an appreciation for all that was provided for them. Us, we did it too.
Right.
We gained an appreciation for what it took for my parents to provide a home for me and to maintain it.
Yes.
Yeah, whenever I had to vacuum for myself and figure out where that was going to happen. Not that I didn't have the chore of vacuuming when I was a kid or have some chores, but it was all my responsibility. Not my sister would clean the kitchen and I would vacuum. Somebody else would mow the lawn. It wasn't the division of labor wasn't there. And so my parents were responsible for a lot, and I did gain an appreciation for that.
Okay. Well, any tips for mother-daughters in this situation who are still living together? I think taking over the water bill was huge. Amazing. Yeah, that's, that I can see where that would be so helpful. Any other tips for?
Yeah, I would listen to the young person and don't assume they don't know anything. It hurts to not feel heard or to not feel. It's hard to go out into the world and be confident when at home I don't feel valued for the way that I think or the ways that I've developed and what I have to offer. Yeah. And we don't always do that with our young people's listening. And we assume that this dynamic will endure throughout our life. My mom still tells me how to drive. She's on the other side of the state. And when she's with me, she still tells me how to drive. She's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'll get to the grocery store without you in my car directing these things.
Some habits are hard to break.
And that's what she says. That's just what I do. Like give instructions. Well, I'm your mother. And I do need to honor that and appreciate that she will always want to care for me and protect me. And that's really nice. So that's the other thing that the young person can appreciate, that somebody wakes up every day and thinks about me.
It's an expression of love.
It's a beautiful thing.
That she's really telling you how to, because she doesn't want you to get hurt, I guess.
That's exactly what it is. Again, we do a lot, between the two of us in here, we've been talking a lot about peeling back the layers. Peel back the layer. What is the sentiment behind the behavior?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I can see where that would be very helpful. Yeah.
On both sides.
Yeah, on both sides. Because I wasn't expecting you to take it from the young person's point of view, but that helps so much, especially I think for a lot of us women that are closer to my age, And
when it's my turn, remind me. Because I'll forget all of this when my baby's trying to launch.
Well, it's definitely different whenever you're in the shoes.
That's right.
So I know I've looked back a lot of times and thought, my poor mama Ooh, what she went through with me, because whenever you're the mom and you're going through it with your own daughter, it is definitely eye-opening.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when Eleanor's 20, promise me you'll call me periodically once a season and say, whatever you're doing, stop.
Think about this. Need to keep a journal now. I better start writing down some of this stuff. Okay, our next question. We feel we're ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. This one's a tough one, and I'm not sure I'm going to read the whole thing, but it's about suicide. And Shelley asks, is there a gray area to suicide? Meaning, does God look at each and every suicide individually and determine if that person is going to hell? Some people think it's an automatic ticket to hell, but I do not. I do believe that God does look at the situation surrounding the suicide, and I think that in life, not everything is black or white, good or bad, and I just think there has to be some gray areas. She goes on a little bit about it, but I think you get the idea of her question.
Right. And I just have to qualify that I am not a theologian. I did not go to seminary. I spent 1 year getting training on how to integrate spirituality into practice. So I am not equipped to fully answer that question. From a mental health perspective, nobody is mentally healthy who is considering suicide. And that is not something negative or to be shamed, because I don't think mental illness is any more of a detriment than physical illness. It's all pretty objectively, it's something that happens.
So what
all of us are vulnerable.
You're saying basically that if you have a stomach virus, you're not completely healthy at that moment.
That's right.
So if you have thoughts of suicide, you're not completely mentally healthy at that moment.
That's right. That's right.
To try to look at it not as a negative against.
Yeah, not as just I'm just pessimistic. I'm just weak. No, it's at this moment, exactly. I like that you said this moment. I'm experiencing a severe level of mental illness that I'm in this space. Okay. And here's the thing, is that most of us at some point in a lifetime consider it. We usually do it in a passive escape kind of way, but we've all thought something like that. I just want to get out of this. I just want this to be over.
Right.
And so that's something that is on that spectrum of suicide. And so that's a space where we're not at our healthiest selves right then. And for me, the thought of God holding me accountable for being healthy when I'm not seems really unfair. It doesn't fit my idea of the heart of God.
Right. It's kind of like that verse, I'm not sure where it is, but where they talk about the age of accountability. And I guess it could apply to, accountability as far as like people with Alzheimer's even,
That's right.
or
That's a good point.
Just dementia, so maybe they're not completely in a place of accountability at that moment.
Absolutely not.
Of course, we're not, like you said, we're not getting into a theological discussion
And
here.
I would encourage that. Get that information. Speak with someone who is educated. Educate yourself. Get in the Word. And also rely very heavily on your own relationship with God. I believe God expresses himself to me differently than he expresses himself to you. And he uses me the way he built me to be in the world. And so he's got different information for me. He's got different goals for me. Different ways that he wants me to see him. And so have that close relationship with God that you can rely on. And if it's inconsistent with the Word, that's definitely a point where you get some more exploration, some expertise.
Okay. And then obviously if someone is thinking about suicide, counseling, obviously call a hotline or...
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Get some help. Somebody is ready to be there for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is somebody that you can reach out to. 1-800-SUICIDE is the suicide hotline. You can find any suicide hotline very easily.
Okay. And I'll make sure to put that in the numbers in the show notes. I just recently found out that you can even text a suicide line.
That is a newer thing. I want to recommend making the phone call, but I'm kind of old school. Because again, like multi-sensory ways of absorbing another person tends to have a better effect.
Right.
But again, there's no shame if all you feel like you can offer is through a text message, then please do that.
Right. And I think another thing, too, is if someone does come to you and they are thinking of suicide, there's important things not to say about it being selfish or how can you, I mean, that could be a whole entire series. But yes,
that's right.
Be very careful what you say to someone who's
just
contemplating
don't shame them for being in that space.
Right.
Yeah, because again, we all know what it feels like to not want to be where we are. And sometimes death is the only thing that we can come up with that actually feels like that would get us out of the space we're in.
Right. Wow. Yeah, my first thought is always to run away to the beach or to run away to some other place. I guess running away to not exist has never crossed my mind, thankfully. Mm-hmm. But I guess, eventually if you run out of places to run to, that you could end up running away to death. But hopefully that would never happen. I see. Where are we? Okay, here's another lighthearted, a little change of tone here. How do I know what to do with me time? I think she meant my time. How do I know what to do with my time? Not that I don't have enough things to do, but too many. Balance, relationships, interests, work, and so on.
Okay. It goes back to...
She did not use the word should.
She didn't use should. Excellent.
She didn't.
What should I do with my
She
time?
learned something from your last
That's
interview.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Well, like we talked about last time, the priorities and making choices out of our priorities.
Uh-huh.
What's the most important to me? Now, before I had a husband and a dog, cleanliness was very important to me. By the time the toddler came along, forget it.
Mm-hmm.
But priorities can shift. Priorities can shift. When I kept a very clean house, a very straight house. And then when I got married and the husband and the dog moved in, I tried to vacuum twice a day because this thing shed. One point I threw my hands up and I told my husband that it was either him or the dog, and one of them had to go, and they needed to discuss it and see who could stay. So what we did was we took back some of our wedding presents and bought a Dyson.
Oh.
So that was a good way to hit that, to address that problem that I was having. And then time with him and time with the dog became a little bit more important than hair on the floor. And then having a child, time with her became more important, and not shaming her for not upholding standards of my adulthood. And that has really helped shift me in the things that I consider a priority in my life. And I imagine that other people's circumstances can do the same thing. Mm-hmm. But the point is to give yourself the power to choose. Recognize that my issues with cleanliness came from my mom. And I talked about that last time. That was her standard. It doesn't have to be mine. Mm-hmm. I happen to like it, and I'm looking forward to getting back to that one day. But it's not today. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen. So giving yourself permission to choose and to let some of the things go, recognizing that at some point in the future, I may shift my priorities and address some of these other things that are on the back burner. I want to write a book one day. I think you want to write a book one day, or at least I keep telling you that you ought to, would benefit from, or the rest of us would benefit from you writing a book. But again, that's not something that has to happen today.
Mm-hmm. There's always tomorrow. And
hopefully,
the next day.
Hopefully, but if there's not a tomorrow, have I spent today the way I wanted to? Would I rather spend the day vacuuming and cleaning or reading with my daughter?
Right. Wow. I can see that both ways because, I have so many interests and so many extra things I want to do, but I also really like my space to be clean and very clean. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I can see the struggle. I don't know if this is her struggle, but I can see where the struggle comes up. Do I practice piano, practice Chinese, write stuff, or do I, and then you've got your kids, you throw that in there, and hopefully some time, with adults, relationships and stuff. So finding that balance, I can see where that's, for me at least, like I said, I don't know what exactly she had in mind, but for me, I do really want my space to be clean, but then I do also have all of these, not even, I don't know if you would call them hobbies or interests, but other things. Like I really want to be fluent in Mandarin. I really want to be able to play certain songs on the piano. So yeah, I could be doing all of these things, but then when I look around and there's dust bunnies or dirty dishes or things on it, then I feel anxiety. So,
well, what's the priority to you? Because you talk about all the interests that you have. If it's a priority for you to reduce your anxiety so that you can engage your interests, then you get those dust bunnies. Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons that I'm exercising when I do. One, no one else needs me at 5 a.m. But in order to be motivated and to be energetic, that's something that I need to do some of the other things that I want to do. So even if I made a list of priorities and said exercise isn't a priority, but health is a priority, or mental energy is a priority, then exercise moves up so that I can be mentally healthy and energetic to do the things that are really important to me. Because I would probably say the priority is my kid, my husband, work.
Gotcha.
But that feeds into that during that exercise. So honestly, it's like the story I told about planning our wedding. Like, what are their priorities? And some things moved around a little bit based on the resources that we had, or if one thing could meet several needs.
True. And you're right. If the piano is covered in dust, I would not be able to practice the piano
right.
until I dusted it. So in a way, the priorities would just make whatever happen in whatever prioritized order. So, yes, that makes sense. Well, that is all of our questions, but I'm wondering if you have any, tips from Dr. J's toolbox that you want to share with us about anything commonly, talked about, things that come up in therapy, that tools that you give people to use, just maybe some cognitive behavior stuff or whatever.
Well, nothing is coming up exactly right now out of the vast things, but
putting
I do
you on the
want
spot.
to make sure that we've adequately address the issue of comparison, since that was the big topic, and evaluating oneself and sense of self-worth. And I just want to really reiterate that must come from us. I evaluate my own self-worth, and I determine if I'm enough, frankly. What I've seen over and over in my practice is that boys and girls in middle school have a whole lot of power. So many of the negative things that we think about who we are come out of that period of our lives because some kid said this to us. Like, you and I have been struggling with the microphone, and we can hear you clearly, and I hear myself being more of the struggle to reach, to project my voice. And I can remember, I won't say her name, but I remember her name very clearly, who told me in 6th grade that I was loud. And so I've got this stereotype of the loud black woman on my shoulders, and I let her determine so much of my behavior, even into my 40s.
Wow.
And recognizing that happens, that maybe I don't project my voice because she thinks I'm loud, and maybe other people think I'm loud, and maybe I fit into that stereotype and people won't take me seriously. That's a lot of power for an 11-year-old girl to have over someone.
Wow.
And that happens. So that's a challenge to me, to decide for myself what my value is on that.
And maybe that time period, the fact that hormones are starting up, maybe has a lot to do with why
what her motivation was in that. Maybe she just thought I was loud. That doesn't mean I think I'm loud.
Right.
And I'm the one that lives with me. She's not around here in my 40s. I am.
Wow. That's kind of opposite of what happened to me, but I never thought of myself as a loud person. I always felt like I was really outgoing and stuff, but then, my husband's pretty much an introvert, and I feel like I've always kind of been an extrovert. So I'm like popular and have all these friends and stuff, and he's happy to just be on his own quietly reading a book or whatever, which I like to read books too, but I also like to socialize. And I think the more we were around each other and the quieter he was, the louder I felt I was, and the bigger and too much kind of. Right. So I don't know. I mean.
And why are we tempted to decide I'm too much?
Right.
Versus, no, I'm just right, and you deal with how you feel about it. And it doesn't mean to be ugly. It's just, it doesn't give other people the power to determine how we feel about ourselves. It's okay if she thinks I'm too loud. That's okay.
That's her thought.
That's her thought.
That doesn't define you.
No, and nor does it mean there's something negative about who I am. Maybe I have a lot to say. Maybe I'm proud. Maybe I'm wise. Maybe other people want to hear what I have to say.
Yeah, maybe your parents have hearing aids.
There's no telling. That's right. That's right.
And you got used to talking loud. Okay. Yeah, and I can see that. I've observed that a lot with my children, and now I'm down to my last two, going through that phase. And I've seen that even just since my son started school, just the types of things that kids say to each other and the influence that it definitely, I guess it could impact just how we
make decisions about ourselves based on it. And then we look for evidence that those decisions that we've made about ourselves are true. And we'll find it. Right.
Do you think it's harder? I actually think it is, but I'm curious what your perspective is. I know you don't spend a lot of time on social media, but I feel like a lot of people do. And I know myself personally, I have, over the last year or so, started avoiding a certain amount of social media, because even at my age, and I'll be 48 in a couple months, I find myself comparing myself to even people that it's not even realistic for me to compare myself to.
Right.
Never going to look like a 21-year-old again.
Right.
I'm 48. That doesn't even make sense. Or just comparing yourself to people who are more successful by that other measuring stick.
There you go.
Or people who are out there and they look like they're doing all these things. The people that look like they're, traveling to foreign countries all the time and they're always on vacation. Right. And you see this, and I know that that's obviously they're putting the best of their world on social media. Still, there is a tendency to, so I'm sitting at home again this weekend while everyone's out partying. You use that all or nothing language inside of your head. What do you feel about that self-doubt and comparison with social media?
Realistically, evaluate yourself. If you're sitting at home another weekend, ask yourself why. It's probably because you want to be.
Yeah, probably so.
It probably is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find that, no, I really don't want this and this doesn't feel good, then you've identified something that you need that you're not meeting. And then you can figure out ways to meet that need.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just real with yourself versus putting yourself down for not being something that you perceive you should be or you decide you want to be, then you have some power to make some changes there. But again, if we can just get out of this negative evaluation of self and look at things more objectively, then we have the opportunity to truly explore it without risk to ourselves.
Okay. I think it's fascinating whenever I catch myself doing that because I think, at my age, I would think I would be over that. But I read a study, I can't remember which university did these 2 studies where they showed women pictures of, the supermodel type body. And somehow they evaluated how they felt about themselves before seeing these images and after. And even though they had only shown the images for like a millisecond, it was just like a flash, the women actually felt worse about themselves.
That's right.
And I think Jami and I talked about this. I can't remember if it was the episode, the self-doubt episode, but I said, my technique or my tip, my life application tip is just to stop doing that.
Right.
Stop looking at it. But then again, you can't always because there's billboards and there's those giant posters in the mall when you're walking by.
Just products at the grocery store.
It happens. You gotta eat. Yeah. And the magazines at checkout, and the commercials, and you can't avoid it. You can try, like, for example, on Instagram, I don't follow a bunch of bodybuilders. I don't follow, supermodels or whatever. I avoid that. I tend to try to look at other things, but in the real world, the not curated world, you're going to be exposed to it anyways.
That's correct. Can you ask yourself, why did these people in the magazines look this way? Why are the women in the commercials or on the billboards, why do they look this way? Because somebody needs to sell us something. If I'm satisfied with myself,
you're not going to buy anything. Oh my, so true.
So if we can call it what it is, this is marketing.
Right.
There's a purpose to this. Somebody's telling me I should look this way, and if I buy in, if they're convincing enough, they get to make money. So while you and I are hustling, they're enjoying themselves on a vacation that we paid for by doubting ourselves.
Oh my, that is so empowering. And you can even apply that to Instagram because a lot of these people with the big mega accounts on Instagram, they're selling some kind of a powder or program or something. Anyways.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can decide, you know what, I'm worth sitting on the beach and I'm going to put my money towards my vacation instead of these products that make me feel like I'm supposed to be something else that I'm not. I'm really that interested in being.
Yeah. Because really, it is just a momentary, like in your daily, routine.
That's
how many times would you honestly compare yourself to a supermodel if you weren't exposed to these images?
I've never even seen one in real life.
I don't think I have either.
No, I haven't seen one in real life. And self-doubt just limits us so much. Think about all the things we miss out on. And if you can bring that to consciousness, like, what is my self-doubt keeping me from doing that would satisfy me?
Mm-hmm.
So one night I met up with a friend. We went to movies on Market Square. And so as I was pulling up, I always keep my rain boots in the car. As I was pulling up, it started to drizzle. And I thought, I still want to go. And I know the rain may stop. So I just took off my heels, put on my rain boots, and I went out. We sat and watched the movie. The rain did stop, and then we decided, well, let's go have tacos and margaritas. And then we did that. And once the margaritas got in us, we thought, let's go dancing. And so we went dancing.
In your rain boots?
In my rain boots, having the best time. And there were some young women who started giggling and pointing at me. And so I'm going to reveal a little bit of my cattiness. I walked over to them and I said, one day, my hope for you, and I did mean this authentically. It sounded catty. I meant it authentically. One day I hope for you that you will be confident enough to not miss the moment because you don't have the right shoes on.
Oh, I love it. I thought you were going to say, one day I hope for you that you will be confident enough to dance in your rain boots.
Same thing.
That should be a bumper sticker.
Right. The same thing.
It is.
I think of all the fun I could have missed with this friend. And,
if you had been like that.
I thought, well, I can't go because I'm wearing rain boots.
I don't think that's catty at all. I think that's your genuine personality of caring and wanting the best for other people and recognizing that in them that there would come a day.
Yeah. Don't miss the moment.
Right.
Don't not go to the beach because you didn't lose that last 5 pounds. Enjoy the waves.
Boy, I've done that.
Right?
Because if you keep putting off doing the thing until you look just right, you might not ever do it. Yeah, you'll miss out.
Self-doubt is a poison. Yeah. Accurate self-evaluation can benefit us if we can find things about ourselves that we'd like to change and we empower ourselves to change them for the better, but not based on someone else's standards.
Right. And self-doubt isn't always about body image. It can also be about, and I find this a lot in the mom world, and, even in the wifey world, is that, oh, they have this relationship, they're soulmates, or she is this kind of mom and I'm not, or whatever. I mean, I think it can apply to so many other places besides body image.
Absolutely. I question my decision to be a career woman. Every day I walk into my kitchen and Eleanor is sitting there eating dinner already. I do. I question that. But she sees her mom walk in professional clothes and her heels and her pencil skirt and I think that's possible for me.
Mom boss.
That's possible for me. But it is also possible for her to devote her life to being a mother. It's all still possible. And so I'm just giving her some information by being the person that fits for me to be.
Being your authentic self.
Being my authentic self. Yeah. Would I like to give her more? Yes. But I give her what works for me.
That's really good. I think it's sometimes hard to, for me at least, because I have allowed self-doubt to just rear its ugly head so many times that sometimes I am not even sure about my authentic self,
Right. It is easy to lose that.
Right. And so I think, maybe some exercises in just finding out who you are.
Right. And recognizing that who you are may fit a lot of things, but that you make a choice. Again, like I said, every day I have this conversation with myself. And then I remember this is the choice that I made that fits for me today.
So you do have to remind yourself.
Absolutely.
It's not just something that one time you do it and it's done.
No. Again, whenever people come to therapy, I always say it's a process. Get rid of your notion of the finish line. But I will help you get confident in your ability to be in the process. So I'm confident that I can work through that conversation with myself without carrying shame into the evening.
Wow, I have a lot to think about. I mean, that's really a lot. That's so insightful and really empowering because, I mean, I feel like I have so much that I can work with now.
Yeah, we all do. And there's a part of me, to be honest, that's tempted to feel badly about myself that you're just now getting this from me after all this time.
Oh, come on.
But again, that's a conversation I have with myself. I think, well, yeah, you always say you're in a process. This is part of our process.
It is. And I mean, and I have learned so much from you. And I think it is a process and that, and I get it a little bit now, but I'll probably get it a little bit more another time too.
And I will too.
Right. I have learned. I mean, I'm telling you, it's definitely, I can't even stress enough how much it is a process because, I know you've repeated things to me multiple times, but there are certain things I feel like have stuck better than others. For example, the worry time, that's one that I feel like it just, clicked with me and I use that. Then there's some days whenever I just binge watch Netflix all day because I forgot to put my worry in the jar that day. But anyhow, but yeah, it is a process and we can't expect ourselves to be perfect.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and in my own therapy, my therapist has been in practice for 40 years, and he says something like, why don't I know that?
Your therapist says to you?
And I think, what? I've been not giving my people what they need, because this guy says this thing, and that didn't even occur to me. But that's, again, part of my process, personally and professionally.
I love it that you see a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Taking care of yourself so you can take care of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's good. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap this up for today. I really appreciate you helping us and answering our questions. It's just so wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for listening to Jubilee Road Podcast. And make sure you check the show notes because that's where all the goodies will be. And there'll be a link to Dr. J's YouTube channel, which you've recently started.
That's right.
So make sure you go over and check that out. Until next week. Bye.
Thanks for joining Jami and Rebecca for this episode of Jubilee Road Podcast. If you loved this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it on iTunes so more women like you can find freedom in the grace journey. And join the girls here next week for another episode.